Captain Jiwon stood near the door of the space station. His uniform was clean and pressed. His hands did not shake, but his mind was racing. Today was the day, the first time humans would meet the Vexari Empire face to face. He had spent 6 months preparing for this moment, learning their language, studying their customs, trying to understand who they were. The Vexari were not like humans. They were warriors, strong and proud. They had ruled 3 star systems for thousands of years. Their ships were beautiful and deadly. They could destroy a moon if they wanted to. Humans were new to space. Their technology was simple compared to the Vexari. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were weak. But they were here now. Ready to meet equals. Commander Mirai stood next to Jiwon. She was watching the door too. Both of them knew how important this was. If this meeting went well, humans and Vexari could be friends. If it went badly, there might be war. The pressure was real. The stakes were high. The door opened with a soft hiss. Air rushed in from the other side. Then they appeared. The Vexari delegation walked through the doorway. The lead figure was their ambassador. Her name was Thelana. Jiwon had seen pictures of Vexari before. But pictures did not prepare him for the real thing. Thelana was tall, taller than any human. She had 4 arms, each one moving with perfect grace. Her skin was hard, like armor, and it glowed with soft light. The light changed colors as she moved. It flickered from blue to purple to green. Patterns ran across her skin like living art. Her face was angular and sharp. 2 large eyes, bright amber in color, looked straight at him. She had smaller eyes too, dotted across her forehead. They were all watching him at once. Crystal structures grew from her shoulders, catching the light and throwing it back in rainbow colors. She looked powerful. She looked dangerous. She looked like a warrior born to rule. Behind her came 4 more Vexari. They were soldiers, clearly. They moved like fighters, alert, ready. Their armor gleamed. Their weapons hung at their sides. They did not look friendly. They looked like they were ready for a fight if one came. Jiwon knew he should speak carefully. He had practiced diplomatic words for months. He knew exactly what to say. The proper greetings, the formal phrases. Everything was planned. Everything was ready. But when he opened his mouth, something else came out. The words were in perfect Vexari. He had learned the language well. The sounds came naturally to him now. The clicking consonants, the singing tones. He spoke them without thinking. He said she was beautiful. The words hung in the air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything stopped. Every Vexari in the room froze. The light patterns on Thelana's skin stopped moving. Her whole body went completely still. It was like watching a statue, like watching a predator that had just spotted prey. Jiwon felt Mirai's hand move toward her weapon. He saw the Vexari soldiers shift their positions. The air in the room felt suddenly heavy, dangerous. He realized he had made a terrible mistake. But he did not know what it was. Thelana's voice was strange. It was musical and harsh at the same time. The translator on Jiwon's ear turned it into Korean, but he could hear the sharpness in her original words. She was not happy. She asked what he had just said. Her voice was like a knife. It could cut through steel. Jiwon's training told him to back down, to apologize, to say it was a translation error. But something in him refused. He was a captain. He had faced danger before. He would not lie just because he was scared. He repeated himself. He said she was beautiful. Then he explained why. He told her about her patterns, how they moved and changed, how they looked like living art. He told her about the way she carried herself, like someone who had earned respect, like someone who had fought for everything she had. That was beautiful to him, not just her appearance, but what it represented. The silence stretched longer. Jiwon could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. He could feel sweat on his back despite the cool air. This was it. He had either made peace or started a war. There was no going back now. Then Thelana made a sound. It was strange, musical. The translator could not figure it out. It just buzzed in his ear with no translation. The sound came from deep in her throat. It rippled through the air. Her soldiers looked at each other. They seemed confused, surprised, maybe even shocked. The light patterns on Thelana's skin started moving again. But they were different now. Colors Jiwon had not seen before. Colors that were not in any of the briefing files. They pulsed slowly, steadily, like a heartbeat made of light. She spoke again. Her voice was different now, softer, but still dangerous. She asked if he understood the word he had used. The word for beautiful in Vexari. Did he really know what it meant? Ji-won said yes. He had studied for 2 years. He knew the language well. One of her soldiers stepped forward. His voice was aggressive, challenging. He explained the word through the translator. In Vexari language, the word was not simple. It did not just mean pretty or nice looking. It meant something much deeper. Much more important, the word meant combat skill. It meant genetic superiority. It meant the right to lead and to breed. It was not given lightly. It was earned through blood and victory. It was a warrior's word. A word of ultimate respect. Ji-won felt the weight of what he had said. He had called this alien warrior, this ambassador of a mighty empire, by their highest term of respect. And he was just a human, a member of a species that had barely left their own planet. What right did he have to judge her by Vexari standards? But he did not back down. He looked Thelana straight in her amber eyes. He said he knew what the word meant. He said he had chosen it carefully. He meant every part of it. Thelana's pattern shifted again. All her small eyes focused on him at once. It was like being examined by a microscope. She asked him to explain. Her species had no warriors worthy of note. They had fought no great battles beyond their own world. What gave him the authority to judge her? To use that word? Ji-won took a breath. This was the moment. Everything depended on what he said next. He chose his words carefully. He spoke clearly. He wanted her to understand. He told her that humans had a different view of strength. Humans had spent their entire history fighting. Not just each other, but their world itself. They had climbed out of caves not because they were the strongest or the fastest. They survived because they were stubborn. They refused to give up. They survived ice ages. They survived diseases that killed millions. They survived their own worst impulses. They split atoms and reached the stars not through genetic superiority. They did it through cooperation, through determination, through sheer refusal to accept defeat. He gestured at her. He pointed to small marks on her armor. Her left arm had slight differences. The patterns were not quite the same on both sides. Those were scars, he said. Battle scars. They had healed, but they were still there. Permanent. The way her soldiers treated her was not fear. It was respect. Real respect. That kind of respect was not given because of breeding. It was earned. Through fighting, through leading, through proving yourself again and again. That, he said, was what humans called beautiful. Not just the surface. Not just appearances. But what lay beneath. The story. The struggle. The triumph over obstacles. The refusal to quit. That was true beauty. That was true strength. And that was what he saw when he looked at her. The room was silent. Even the hum of the station's air system seemed to fade away. Every eye was on them, human and Vexari alike, waiting, watching, wondering what would happen next. Thelana's patterns changed to a deep violet. They pulsed slowly, rhythmically. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, quieter, almost vulnerable. She asked if humans really saw scars as marks of honor. As good things, Ji-won said yes. Of course, scars were proof. Proof that you survived. Proof that you fought. Proof that you were still here, still standing, still fighting. Thelana was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised everyone. She said that among her people, scars were shameful. They showed failure. Failure to avoid damage. Genetic weakness. She had been passed over for promotions because of her scars. They had been used to question her right to command. To question her worth as a warrior. Ji-won felt something shift in that moment. This was not just a diplomatic meeting anymore. This was something deeper. Two cultures meeting, two ways of thinking about strength and worth. And somehow, a simple compliment had opened a door that no one expected. The first meeting between humans and the Vexari Empire had not gone according to plan. But perhaps that was for the best. Perhaps the best things never did. The conference room felt different after that first meeting. Ji-won and Mireille sat on one side of the long table. Thelana and her delegation sat on the other side. But something had changed. The air was not as tense. The Vexari were still watchful, still alert, but not hostile. Not anymore. Thelana's patterns had settled into a steady blue-green color. Ji-won was learning to read them. Blue meant calm. Green meant curiosity. Together they meant she was interested but cautious. That was good. Caution was smart. But interest meant she was willing to listen. She spoke first. Her voice was still formal but less sharp than before. She said she wanted to understand. To really understand. How could humans look at scars and see honor? How could weakness be strength? It did not make sense to her. To any Vexari, Jiwan thought about how to explain. He needed a story. Humans always understood things better through stories. Maybe Vexari would too. He told her about a human warrior from long ago. His name was Jinho. He lived hundreds of years before humans went to space. There was a great war on Earth, nations fighting nations. Jinho was a soldier. He fought to protect his homeland and his people. One day, Jinho's unit was attacked. The battle was fierce, many died. Jinho fought hard, but he was struck down. An explosion threw him against a wall. His body was broke behind. 3 days later, his unit came back to that place. They found Jinho still alive. He had crawled to shelter. He had managed to stop his own bleeding. He had survived on rainwater and willpower alone. They could not believe it. By all logic, he should have been dead. The doctors said he would never walk again. Never fight again. His career as a soldier was over. But Jinho refused to accept that. He spent 2 years learning to walk again, learning to move again, learning to be strong again. It was painful. It was slow. But he did not quit. When he finally returned to service, his body was covered in scars. Half his face was marked. His legs worked, but not perfectly. He walked with a slight limp. By Vexari standards, he would have been considered defective, unfit, weak. But do you know what happened? His soldiers followed him more fiercely than ever before. Not despite his scars, but because of them. He had proven something important. You could be broken and still put yourself back together. Survival was not about avoiding damage. It was about enduring damage and standing up anyway. Jiwan paused. He let the story sink in. Thelana's patterns had shifted to pure blue. She was listening carefully, thinking deeply. Mireille spoke up. She added something important. Humans had a saying, she said. An old phrase. What does not kill you makes you stronger. It was not always literally true, but the idea mattered. Humans did not hide their damage. They wore it. They learned from it. They let it remind them that they could survive anything. One of the Vexari warriors made a clicking sound, a sound of confusion or disagreement. He asked why humans did not simply breed better warriors, warriors who did not scar, warriors who healed perfectly, warriors who had no weakness. That would be more efficient, more logical. Jiwan shook his head. He explained that the strongest warriors were not always the ones born perfect. Sometimes they were the ones who had to fight just to stand up, who had to overcome their own bodies, their own limitations, who learned to adapt because they had no choice. Those warriors learned things that perfect warriors might never learn. They learned patience. They learned creativity. They learned to find solutions when brute force did not work. They learned that there was always another way, always another path, always hope, even when things seemed hopeless. Thelana herself commanded not despite her scars, but partially because of them. Those scars had taught her lessons. Lessons about pain, about survival, about what it took to keep going when everything hurt. Those were valuable lessons, lessons that could not be taught in training, lessons that could only be learned through experience. The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not tense, not hostile, thoughtful, contemplative. The Vexari were thinking about these ideas, these strange human ideas about strength and weakness. Thelana's patterns shifted again, this time to a color Jiwan had not seen before. It was between silver and gold. Beautiful and strange. Her voice was soft when she spoke. Almost wondering, she said that humans fascinated her. They were weak by Vexari physical standards. Their bodies were soft. They broke easily. Their ships were primitive. Their technology was centuries behind. By every measure the Vexari used, humans should not be impressive, should not be worth notice, and yet here they were, standing unbowed, teaching a Vexari ambassador to see strength in new ways. This was not what she had expected. Jiwan asked what she had expected. What did the Vexari think about humans before this meeting? Thelana was silent for a moment. Then she answered honestly. The Empire had sent her to understand what made humans dangerous. Not powerful, dangerous, there was a difference. Power was easy to measure. Ship weapons, army size. technology level. Humans had little power by those measures, but danger was different. Danger came from unpredictability, from thinking differently, from refusing to follow the expected patterns. The Empire had studied human history. They saw species that should have gone extinct many times, ice ages that should have killed them, diseases that should have wiped them out, wars that should have destroyed them. But humans survived, every single time, through adaptation, through cooperation, through sheer stubborn refusal to die. That was dangerous. A species that could not be killed. A species that learned from every disaster. A species that turned every weakness into a reason to work together more closely. That was worth understanding, worth studying, worth respecting. Now Thelana said she was beginning to understand. Humans found power in places the Vexari considered weakness. They turned scars into badges of honor. They made survival itself a weapon. They refused to accept any limitation as permanent. That philosophy, that worldview, was fundamentally different from Vexari thinking. The Vexari believed in perfection, in breeding the best warriors, in genetic superiority, in eliminating weakness before it could spread. Humans believed in something else. They believed everyone had value. Everyone had potential. Everyone could contribute. The soldier who seemed weak might be brilliant in other ways. The person who struggled might develop unique solutions. Diversity was not a flaw. It was a strength. Mirai added another point. She talked about human history, about how humanity's greatest achievements came from cooperation, not competition. The space program, medical advances, technology breakthroughs, all of it came from people working together, sharing ideas, building on each other's work. Humans were not the smartest species individually, but collectively they were formidable. They shared knowledge freely. They taught each other. They lifted each other up. One person's discovery became everyone's tool. One person's insight became everyone's advantage. That was another kind of strength. A kind the Vexari had not fully considered. The strength of the many working as one. Not through hive mind or genetic programming, but through choice, through trust, through shared purpose. Thelana's patterns continued to glow that strange silver-gold color. She asked a direct question. Could humans teach the Vexari this way of thinking? Could it work for a species so different? G1 smiled. He said he did not know, but he thought it was worth trying. Change was hard. Changing how you saw the entire world was even harder, but it was possible. Humans had done it many times throughout their history. Every great leap forward started with someone seeing things differently, asking different questions, challenging old assumptions. Maybe the Vexari were ready for that leap. Maybe Thelana herself was the start of something new, someone who could look at her own scars and see not shame but proof of survival, proof of strength, proof that she had earned her place through battle and blood and sheer determination. The ambassador was quiet for a long time. Her patterns pulsed slowly, steadily, like a heart beating, like something being born. A new idea, a new way of seeing, a new possibility. Finally, she spoke. She said she needed to see more, to understand more. Words were one thing, but she needed to see humans in action, see how this philosophy worked in practice, see if it was real or just pretty words. Jiwan agreed immediately. He would arrange for the Vexari to observe human military training, to see how humans prepared their warriors, to see how they turned ordinary people into fighters, to see how they built strength from cooperation rather than competition. It was a risk. The humans would be exposed, vulnerable. The Vexari would see their weaknesses clearly. But Jiwan believed in his species, believed in what they had built, believed that showing the truth was better than hiding behind false strength. The meeting ended, but both sides knew something important had happened. A door had opened. A bridge had been built. Two very different species were beginning to understand each other, not through weapons or threats, but through honest conversation, through sharing stories, through being willing to see the world through alien eyes. As the Vexari left the room, Thelana paused at the door. She looked back at G1. Her patterns flashed that silver-gold color one more time. Then she was gone. Mirai turned to G1. She asked what he thought. Did he really believe this could work? Could the Vexari change their entire culture be? The training facility was located in the lower section of the space station. It was a large room with obstacles, climbing walls, and running tracks. Everything was designed to push human soldiers to their limits. to make them stronger, to prepare them for the dangers of space and combat. Sergeant Hyun was waiting when Ji-won and the Vexari delegation arrived. He was a tough man with gray hair and scars of his own. He had trained soldiers for 20 years. He knew his job well. He greeted the visitors with a respectful nod, then got straight to business. A squad of Marines was already running the obstacle course. 10 soldiers all dressed in standard training gear. They were sweating, struggling. The course was not easy. It was designed not to be easy. The Vexari watched in silence. Their patterns flickered with various colors: curiosity, confusion, maybe disappointment. The humans were moving slowly compared to what Vexari warriors could do. They stumbled, they fell. They had to try obstacles multiple times before succeeding. One of the Vexari warriors spoke up. His voice carried clear disdain. This was human warrior training? They moved so slowly. They fell so often. They failed and had to try again and again. This was inefficient. This was weak. Hyun did not seem offended. He just smiled slightly. He told them to watch what happened when someone fell. To really watch. As if on cue, one of the Marines slipped on the wall climb. It was a 10-foot vertical wall that required strength and technique. The Marine, a young woman named Bora, had almost reached the top. But her hand slipped. She fell backward, hitting the padded floor hard. The sound echoed through the training room. Before the Vexari could comment on the failure, something happened. 2 other Marines immediately dropped down from the wall. They ran to Bora. They checked if she was hurt. They asked if she was okay. She nodded, catching her breath. The fall had knocked the wind out of her, but nothing was broken. Then together, all 3 of them went back to the wall. The first Marine, a man named Doyen, went up first. He reached down. The second Marine, Hana, boosted Bora up from below. Between them, they helped her over the top. All 3 succeeded together. Thelana's pattern shifted to that curious blue-green color again. She observed that they helped each other. Why? This was individual training, was it not? Each soldier should prove their own strength, their own capability. Hyun shook his head. No soldier fights alone, he said. That was the first lesson they taught. The most important lesson? Your strength was the strength of the person beside you. Your weakness was shared and compensated for. Humans did not breed perfect warriors. They forged teams of imperfect ones who covered each other's weaknesses, he explained further. Bora had a fear of heights. She had fallen from a building as a child. She broke her arm. The fear never really left her. Heights made her nervous, made her hands shake. On a wall that was dangerous, but Bora was also the best sniper in her unit. She could hit a target from 3,000 meters away. She could calculate wind, distance, and movement in her head faster than a computer. In combat, she kept her squad safe from threats they never saw coming. Her teammates knew this, so they helped her with walls and she helped them stay alive in battle. Thelana tilted her head. This was specialization, she said. Humans embraced specialization over generalized superiority. Exactly, Mireille confirmed. Why have everyone be mediocre at everything? Why not have experts who work together? Humanity's greatest achievements came from cooperation. Scientists sharing research, engineers building on each other's designs, soldiers covering each other's weaknesses. That was human strength. Not individual perfection, but collective excellence. Another Vexari warrior asked about genetic selection. Why not simply breed warriors without fear? Without weakness? Remove the flaws before they could appear? Ji-won stepped forward. He explained that humans had tried that path once. Not through breeding, but through other means. Through trying to create perfect soldiers, super soldiers, enhanced warriors with no fear, no hesitation, no doubt. It failed. Those soldiers were effective fighters, yes, but they lacked something crucial. They lacked the ability to question orders, to think creatively, to adapt to unexpected situations. Fear was not just a weakness. Fear kept you alert, made you careful, made you think before acting. Doubt made you question, made you consider alternatives, made you avoid stupid mistakes. Hesitation gave you time to think, time to assess, time to find a better solution than just charging forward. The perfect soldier, Ji-won said, was not someone without weakness. It was someone who knew their weaknesses and worked with others who had different strengths. It was someone who could be afraid and fight anyway, someone who could doubt and still commit, someone who could fail and stand back up. Hyun called over the squad that had just finished the course. They stood in a line, still breathing hard from the exercise. He asked them to introduce themselves and explain what they were good at, what made them valuable. Doyen went first. He was good at close combat, hand to hand. He was strong and fast in confined spaces, but he admitted he was not a good shot at long range. His eyes were not sharp enough. He needed glasses for distance. But up close, he was deadly. Hana was next. She was an engineer. She could fix almost anything. Take apart a broken weapon and rebuild it in minutes. But she was not as strong as the others. She could not carry as much equipment. So her squad carried extra for her, and she kept their gear working perfectly. Bora smiled when it was her turn. She was a sniper, as they knew. But she also admitted her fear of heights, her tendency to panic in tight spaces. Her squad knew this. They worked around it. They put her in positions where she could excel, where her strengths mattered more than her weaknesses. One by one, the soldiers introduced themselves. A medic who was terrible at combat but could save your life. A communications expert who could hack enemy systems but could not run very fast. A demolitions expert who was brilliant with explosives but had lost hearing in one ear. Every single one had weaknesses. Obvious, clear weaknesses. In Vexari culture, they would be considered defective, unfit for warrior caste, unsuitable for breeding, but together they were formidable. Each person's strength covered another's weakness. Each person's specialty contributed to the whole. They were not 10 individual warriors. They were one unit, one team, one organism with 10 parts, each part essential. Delana was silent for a long time. Her patterns had shifted to that silver-gold color again. She was processing what she had seen, what she had learned. Finally, she spoke. She said she was beginning to understand why the Empire feared humans. Not because of weapons, not because of technology, but because humans fought in a way no other species did. They turned every weakness into a reason to bind together more tightly. They made strength from vulnerability. This was a different kind of power, a kind the Vexari had not encountered before. Individual Vexari warriors were stronger, faster, tougher than humans. But human units? Human teams? They were something else entirely. They compensated for each other, adapted to each other, fought as a seamless whole. One of her warriors asked a question. What happened when a weak link failed? When someone's weakness cost lives? In Vexari military, that warrior would be removed, demoted or dismissed. The unit could not afford weakness, Hyun answered. Failure happened. People made mistakes, but humans learned from mistakes. They analyzed what went wrong. They trained harder. They adapted their tactics. They did not discard people for failing. They helped them improve. Because everyone failed sometimes. Everyone had bad days. Everyone made mistakes. The difference was how you responded to failure. You could give up on people or you could help them get better. You could see failure as permanent or as temporary, as a reason to quit or as a reason to learn. Humans chose to learn. Always. They had to. Their history was one long string of failures and recoveries. Species almost extinct? They survived. Civilization collapsed? They rebuilt. Technology destroyed? They reinvented it. Over and over and over. Failure was not the end. It was just another step, another lesson, another chance to grow stronger. That mindset, that philosophy had carried humans from caves to the stars. Not superior genetics, not perfect warriors, but ordinary people who refused to give up, who helped each other, who turned weakness into strength through cooperation and sheer stubborn determination. Delana looked at Jiwon. Her voice was quiet but intense. She said this was true beauty, true strength. This was what the word in her language really meant, even if her people had forgotten it. Warriors who fought not just for themselves, but for each other. Warriors who knew their own limits and exceeded them through teamwork. Warriors who faced fear and fought anyway. She turned to her own warriors. She asked them what they thought. Really thought. Not what they were supposed to think. Not what tradition demanded. But what they truly believed after seeing this. The Vexari warriors looked at each other, uncomfortable, uncertain. This challenged everything they had been taught. Everything they believed about strength and weakness, about warriors and breeding, about what made someone worthy. But one of them spoke, slowly, carefully. He said that perhaps there was wisdom here. Perhaps the Vexari had been so focused on individual perfection that they had missed something important. Perhaps cooperation was its own form of strength. Perhaps humans had this. The negotiations had been going on for 3 days now. Formal talks about trade routes, about shared technology, about borders and protocols. The usual diplomatic business. But underneath all of it, something deeper was happening. Something that had nothing to do with treaties and everything to do with understanding. On the evening of the 3rd day, Thelana requested a private meeting with Jiwan. No guards. No advisors. Just the two of them. It was unusual. In Vexari culture, such meetings were rare. They suggested trust, or at least the beginning of trust. They met in the observation deck. It was a large room with windows that looked out into space. Earth hung below them, blue and white and beautiful. The stars stretched out in every direction, endless, infinite, humbling. Thelana stood at the window, her patterns glowing softly in the dim light. She did not turn when Jiwan entered. She just kept looking at Earth, studying it, thinking about it. She spoke without looking at him. "That is your world," she said. "It looks fragile, a thin layer of atmosphere, so much water, which is inefficient for large populations, rocky continents, extreme weather. From orbit, it does not look like much. And yet from that small, vulnerable sphere, you launched yourselves into space, into the unknown. Why?" Jiwan came to stand beside her. He looked at his home planet. He had seen it many times, but it never got old. It never stopped being beautiful. "We did not have a choice," he said quietly. "Our world has always been harsh. Ice ages that covered continents in ice. Volcanic eruptions that blotted out the sun. Earthquakes and tsunamis. Diseases that killed millions. Meteors that struck without warning. Our planet tried to kill us many times. We survived by adapting. By learning. By refusing to give up. Space was just the next challenge. The next obstacle to overcome." Thelana's patterns shifted to deep blue. Contemplative. Thoughtful. "My world is different," she said. "Vexara Prime is stable. Abundant. We evolved as apex predators with few natural threats. Food was plentiful. The climate was mild. We had no need to adapt. Instead, we competed with each other. The strong dominated the weak. That was our evolution. When we reached space, we brought that philosophy with us. Dominate or be dominated. It has served us well for thousands of years." She turned to face him. Her large amber eyes caught the light from Earth below. "But in this past week, you have shown me something I never considered. There are other kinds of strength. Other paths to power. Other ways to survive and thrive. Perhaps what worked for my people is not the only way. Perhaps it is not even the best way." Jiwan asked what she meant. What had changed for her? Thelana was quiet for a moment. Then she began to speak. More openly than before. More honestly than any Vexari diplomat probably should. She told him about her life. She was born into a high caste. Her genetics were considered excellent, strong, fast, intelligent. She was bred to be a warrior, trained from childhood to fight, to lead, to dominate. She rose quickly through the ranks. She won battles. She earned honors. She commanded respect. Everything was as it should be. Everything was perfect. Until the Battle of Kalar Station. It was a minor conflict with a species called the Dreth. The Dreth were raiders, pirates. They attacked a Vexari outpost. Thelana led the response. She was confident. Perhaps overconfident. She underestimated the Dreth, underestimated their desperation. The battle went badly. Her ship was damaged. Her crew was injured. She herself was wounded. Badly wounded. Explosions tore through her ship. Fire and shrapnel. Pain and chaos. She barely survived. They won the battle eventually. Reinforcements arrived. The Dreth were defeated, but Thelana was changed. Her body bore scars, visible scars, asymmetries in her armor plating, marks that would never fully heal. In Vexari culture, this was shameful. Scars meant you had failed to avoid damage, failed to be perfect, failed to maintain your genetic superiority. Other warriors whispered about her, questioned her fitness for command, questioned whether she should be allowed to breed, questioned her worth. She was passed over for promotions, given lesser assignments, sent on diplomatic missions instead of military campaigns. This mission to meet humans? It was considered a punishment, a dead-end job for a damaged warrior. If it went badly, it would not matter. She was expendable. Jiwan listened to all of this in silence. He felt anger rising in him. Anger at how she had been treated. But he kept it controlled. He let her finish, Thelana continued. She said that when she arrived here, she expected nothing. Humans were primitives, weak, insignificant. This would be a simple meeting, some trade agreements, some diplomatic courtesies, then back to Vexara Prime and her quiet, shameful existence. But then Jiwan had called her beautiful, had looked at her scars and seen honor, had seen strength, had seen worth. It shocked her, confused her, challenged everything she believed about herself. And then she saw how humans trained, how they worked together, how they turned weakness into strength through cooperation, how they valued every person regardless of imperfection. It was everything Vexari culture was not, everything she had been taught to despise, but it worked. These weak, slow, fragile humans had built a civilization that reached the stars. They had done it together, supporting each other, carrying each other, refusing to leave anyone behind. Maybe, she said quietly, maybe my people are wrong. Maybe strength is not about perfection. Maybe it is about survival, about adaptation, about working together despite our flaws. Maybe I am not damaged. Maybe I am just experienced. Maybe my scars do not make me weak. Maybe they make me wise. Jiwan smiled. He said that was exactly right. She was not damaged. She was tested. She had faced death and survived. She had made mistakes and learned from them. She had been broken and put herself back together. That was strength of the highest order. Thelana's patterns shifted to that silver-gold color. The color Jiwan had come to associate with hope, with new possibilities, with change. She asked what he thought would happen when she returned to Vexara Prime, when she reported what she had learned, when she tried to tell the Empire that perhaps they had been wrong about strength, about perfection, about what made a true warrior. Jiwan was honest. He said he did not know. Change was hard, especially changing beliefs that were thousands of years old. Some Vexari would resist. Some would reject her message entirely. Some might even see it as treason, but some might listen. Some might see the wisdom in it. Some might be ready for change. And those few could start something, could plant seeds that would grow over time, could begin a transformation that might take generations but could ultimately make the Vexari stronger. Not stronger through genetics. Not stronger through perfection, but stronger through understanding, through cooperation, through recognizing that diversity and adaptation were forms of power, that scars were lessons, that weakness could become strength when properly supported. Thelana nodded slowly. She said she would try. She would report what she had seen, what she had learned. She would tell them about humans, about their philosophy, about their way of war, about their definition of beauty and strength. She would tell them that she had been sent here as damaged goods, as an expendable warrior. But she had found something more valuable than any military victory. She had found a new path forward. Whether they listened or not, whether they accepted it or rejected it, she would try. Because Jiwan had shown her something important. One person could make a difference. One conversation could change minds. One compliment could open doors that had been closed for centuries. She extended all four of her arms in the formal Vexari gesture of deep respect. Captain Kim, she said, you have given me a gift. You looked at me and saw beauty when my own people saw only failure. That is something I will never forget. Whatever happens next, know that you have changed at least one Vexari forever. That is no small achievement. Jiwan returned the gesture with a bow. The honor is mine, Ambassador. You came here with an open mind despite your culture's expectations. That takes courage. That takes strength that changes worlds. They stood together in silence for a while, looking at Earth, looking at the stars. Two people from vastly different worlds finding common ground, finding understanding, finding hope for a future where their species could work together instead of against each other. Finally, Thelana spoke again. She said tomorrow would be the formal treaty signing, the official end of negotiations. But she wanted Jiwan to know something. This treaty was more than just a political document. It was proof that different philosophies could coexist, that different species could learn from each other. That strength came in many forms. The treaty would say that humans and Vexari were allies. But the truth was deeper. They were teachers to each other, mirrors showing what the other could become, bridges between two ways of being strong. Jiwan agreed. He said that whatever came next this week had mattered. It had changed both of them, had opened possibilities that neither species had considered before. That was worth celebrating, worth protecting, worth building on. Thelana's patterns glowed bright with that silver gold light. Yes, she said. Worth everything. Tomorrow we sign papers, but tonight we have already signed something more important. An understanding, a friendship, a promise to see each other as we truly are, beautiful in our own ways, strong in our own ways, valuable in our own ways. They stayed in the observation D. The final day had arrived. The treaty signing ceremony was set for noon. The conference room had been prepared with formal decorations. Flags from both Earth and Vexara Prime hung side by side. Representatives from both governments were present. Everyone wore their best uniforms. Everything was perfect, formal, official. But Jiwon knew the real work had already been done. Not in negotiations about trade routes or technology transfers, not in debates about borders or protocols. The real work had happened in quieter moments. In conversations. In shared understanding. In one Vexari ambassador learning to see herself differently. Thelana entered the room with her delegation. Her patterns were steady, confident. That silver gold color that meant hope and change. She looked different somehow. She carried herself differently. Not with the aggressive pride of Vexari warriors, but with something else. Something calmer, deeper, more certain. The ceremony began with formal speeches. The human ambassador spoke about peace and cooperation. About the benefits of alliance. About the exciting future ahead. The words were nice but predictable. Diplomatic and safe. Then it was Thelana's turn to speak. Everyone expected similar words. Similar, safe diplomatic language. But Thelana surprised them. She spoke from the heart. Without notes. Without prepared remarks. Just honest words. She said that when she came to this station a week ago, she expected to meet primitives. Weak species barely worthy of notice. She came with superiority and pride. She came expecting to dictate terms from a position of strength. She came expecting nothing of value. Instead, she found warriors who understood strength better than her own empire. She found a species that had turned every disadvantage into an advantage. She found people who looked at her scars and saw honor instead of shame, who looked at her differences and saw beauty instead of defect. She told them about her conversation with Captain Jiwon, about how one simple compliment had shaken her entire worldview, about how watching human soldiers train had taught her lessons she never learned in decades of Vexari military service, about how humans had shown her a different path to strength, a path based on cooperation rather than competition, on adaptation rather than perfection. Some of the Vexari in her delegation looked uncomfortable. This was not standard diplomatic language. This was personal, revealing, risky, but Thelana did not care. She was done pretending, done hiding behind protocol and tradition. She said that when she returned to Vexara Prime, she would tell the Council what she had learned. She would tell them that humanity was not a weak species to be dominated or dismissed. They were a dangerous species. Dangerous in the best possible way. Dangerous because they thought differently, because they refused to accept limitations, because they turned every setback into a learning opportunity. She would tell them that the Vexari Empire could learn from humans. Not about technology or weapons, but about philosophy, about seeing strength in unexpected places, about recognizing that perfection was not the only path to power, about understanding that scars and struggles made you stronger, not weaker. She did not know if they would listen. They might reject her message. They might see her as contaminated by alien ideas. They might punish her for deviating from tradition. But she would try anyway, because some truths were worth fighting for. Some ideas were worth spreading. Some changes were worth pursuing even if they seemed impossible. The room was silent when she finished. Even the humans seemed surprised by her honesty, her vulnerability, her willingness to challenge her own culture so openly. Then Jiwon stood up. He was not scheduled to speak, but he felt compelled to respond. To honor her courage with his own, he said that Ambassador Thelana had taught humans something too. She had shown them that even the mightiest empires could change. Even the proudest warriors could learn. Even the most rigid traditions could bend. That gave him hope. Hope that the galaxy was not fixed, not determined, not locked into patterns that could never shift. If a Vexari ambassador could question millennia of tradition, then anything was possible. If two species so different could find common ground, then peace was achievable. If one honest compliment could open doors between worlds, then communication and understanding were more powerful than any weapon. This treaty they were about to sign was important. But it was also just paper. Just words and agreements and legal frameworks. The real treaty had already been signed. In conversations. In shared moments. In mutual respect. In recognition that both species had something valuable to offer each other. The formal signing happened after that. Both sides put their marks on the documents. Hands and claws pressing seals into wax, signatures and symbols making it official. Cameras recorded everything. History was being made, the first formal alliance between humanity and the Vexari Empire, but Jiwon and Thelana knew the truth. The real alliance had been forged before this moment. In training rooms and observation decks. In honest conversations and vulnerable admissions. In one warrior seeing another warrior truly, without prejudice, without assumptions, just honest recognition of strength in its many forms. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Food and drinks, mingling and conversation, celebrating. But eventually, Jiwon and Thelana found themselves alone again. One last moment together before she had to leave. They stood at the same window where they had talked the night before, looking at Earth, looking at the stars, saying goodbye without words for a while. Finally, Thelana spoke. She thanked him, not formally, not diplomatically, but genuinely, from the heart. She said he had given her something precious, a new way of seeing herself, a new way of understanding strength, a new hope for what she and her people could become. She said that when she looked in the mirror now, she would see her scars differently, not as marks of failure, but as marks of survival, of learning, of growth. She would remember that a human captain had looked at her and seen beauty, true beauty, the kind that mattered. Jiwon said she had given him something too. She had shown him that change was possible, that even the most unlikely people could grow, that honest words could bridge impossible gaps. That courage came in many forms, and one of the bravest to question everything you had been taught. Thelana's patterns flashed bright silver gold one final time. She said she would return someday. When things had settled on Vexara Prime, when she knew whether her message had taken root or been rejected, she would come back to see how humanity was doing, to continue learning, to continue growing, to continue this conversation they had started. Jiwon said he would be waiting, that humanity would be waiting, ready to share more stories, more lessons, more understanding, because that was what allies did, what friends did. They supported each other's growth, celebrated each other's victories, helped each other through challenges. They said their formal goodbyes in front of everyone, proper diplomatic farewells, but they both knew the real goodbye had happened in that quiet moment by the window, that private acknowledgement of what they had built together. What they had become together. The Vexari delegation departed. Their ship detached from the station and glided away into the starfield, growing smaller, disappearing, gone but not forgotten. Never forgotten. Mirai found Jiwon still standing at the observation window, watching the empty space where the Vexari ship had been. She asked how he felt, whether he thought the alliance would hold, whether Thelana would succeed in changing her people's minds. Jiwon smiled. He said he did not know. Change took time, sometimes generations, but seeds had been planted. Ideas had been shared. Understanding had begun. That was enough. That was more than enough. Mirai asked about that first moment, when he had called Thelana beautiful. Had he known what would happen? Had he planned any of this? Jiwon laughed. No, he said. He had not planned anything. The words had just come out. Honest and unfeedimes, the best things happened when you stopped trying to control everything, when you just spoke truth and let it fall where it may. He had seen something beautiful in Thelana. The patterns on her skin, the way she carried herself, the scars that told stories of survival, the strength that came from experience rather than genetics. He had simply said what he saw, what he felt, what was true, and that truth had changed everything, had opened doors, had built bridges, had started conversations that would echo for years, maybe centuries, all because one person had been willing to speak honestly, to see beyond surface differences, to recognize beauty in unexpected places. That was humanity's real strength, Jiwon thought. Not technology, not weapons, not genetic perfection, but the ability to connect, to understand, to see value in others, to build relationships across impossible divides, to find common ground where none seemed to exist. The Vexari had dominated their corner of space through force. through superior genetics, through military might. But humans had something different, something that might prove even more in the long run. The ability to make friends, to build alliances, to inspire change through example rather than conquest. Mireille smiled. She said something that made Jiwon laugh. An old Earth phrase from the early space days, when humans were first exploring beyond their planet, first encountering the vast universe, first realizing they had a place in it despite all their flaws and limitations. The phrase was "Essie,"